the exact way it happened because he had to pay for the penalty of all of our sin. So just bear with me, but I want to read this to you in the terms of what happened with Jesus. It says the initial beating alone was enough to cause hypovolemic shock. My wife joked about this, said, can you read that off? Hypovolemic shock occurs when there's a loss of approximately 20% or more of the body's blood supply. This blood loss depletes oxygen to the body because the heart is prevented from pumping more blood, which contains oxygen needed. Hypovolemic shock causes nausea, dizziness, profuse sweating, confusion, and loss of consciousness. Yet Jesus allowed them to continue, talking about the soldiers that were beating him. After being flogged with 9-tailed whip, a crown of thorns was forced onto his head, causing huge lacerations. The blood from these wounds would be flowing into his eyes, causing burning, making it difficult to see. The soldiers covered him with a purple robe and mocked him and said, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They hit Jesus on the head with a reed, spit on him, and humiliated him beyond belief. But Jesus, he said nothing. As if this was not enough, Jesus was forced to carry a wooden beam to the place of his crucifixion. This beam would have been extremely heavy after being beaten. Jesus would have been immensely weak. He was so weak that he needed assistance carrying it. But not only that, however, this wood was really rough, jagged, and splintered. As Jesus walked, this ragged plank moved up and down his back, shoving huge splinters into his open flesh. Even after being nailed onto the cross, the splinters would continue to exacerbate the wounds on his back. Every time Jesus would shift his weight from his feet to his arms, then back to his feet, his back would rub against the splintered wood, causing a constant stabbing into the open wounds. Some of the wooden shreds remained lodged into the muscles and exposed the nerve endings. It could even further tear his wounds open. Let's talk about the nails. The nails were driven into Jesus' wrist and pierced the main nerve running through the arm. When Jesus would push up to breathe, his wrist rotated against the nail, which would irritate the nerves and cause intense pain in his arms. The open nerves were exposed to the thick metal, which produced a constant, reoccurring, excruciating pain that had to be endured every time Jesus pulled up to breathe. The vertical beam that would hold the horizontal beam was already standing in the ground. Jesus was nailed to the horizontal beam while it was still flat on the ground. With his wrists nailed into the horizontal beam, the beam was lifted and then hammered into the vertical beam. When this happened, Jesus' feet were still not nailed into the vertical beam. At this point, Jesus' shoulders would have been dislocated because he had no leverage to push his body up. The weight of his hanging body, once it was raised, would have pulled his shoulders out of socket. The result of this was that his arms would extend at least 6 inches beyond their reach. With his shoulders dislocated, his body hung in a slumped position, which forced his chest cavity to protrude. An extended chest cavity allowed Jesus to inhale, but exhaling was nearly impossible. The inability to exhale caused an increase in carbon dioxide throughout the body. Increased carbon dioxide puts the body into acidosis, which leads to the failure of central nervous system, among other things. Since the body doesn't get enough oxygen while hanging on the cross, the natural physiological response is hyperventilation. Oxygen depravity makes the heart pump harder, which leads to cardiac stress. Cardiac stress can then cause the heart to rupture inside the chest cavity. When Jesus hung on the cross, his knees were bent at 45-degree angle, which meant he had to sustain the weight of his body with his thigh muscles. It is painful to bend the knees and support one's weight with the thighs alone for even 5 minutes. Doing this for hours would have been unimaginable. And I'm going to stop there because we keep going and we understand that this was not an easy death. This was not a quick, he suffocated. He did a brutal death. He did a brutal death for you, for me. Would you do that for him? Would you do that for him? Any parent in here, would you ever think about giving up your child for the cause of another child in that way? No shot. There's no way I'm doing that. But you have a father. You have a father in heaven that did that for you because he knew that somebody had to pay a price. Somebody had to pay a price. And we couldn't have done it. We would have got to judgment day and we would have said, "Lord, judge me." And it would have been done. But he knew that he could do it. He knew that this was the only way. So when we talk about, does God care about me? Sometimes I just pull up my phone and I just read that right there. Right? Sometimes I just pull that up and I'll read that right there because I'm like, man, I know how far off I am. And the crazy part about it, we just read in Romans 5:8, is that while we were still sinners, it wasn't like I took a bath and I got cleaned up and then I went to the Father and said, Lord, here I am, take me, right? I didn't do none of that. I was running. I was doing my own thing. I still get lost in my own thing. And He chooses us. He chooses you right now. So the next time you get this thought with your head, does Jesus really love me? Does Jesus really care about me? I want you to think about that, right? Think about the fact that He died, not just a little bitty death, right? He died a tragic death because He cares about you. He cares about you. You are worth it.